Thank you, guys. Thank you for taking your seats. We appreciate that. And we appreciate that you're here. Welcome to our town hall meeting on oil and gas regulations. My name is Kim Overholt, and I'm Communications and Engagement Manager for the City of Loveland. Today, I'm joined by a few staff members. We've got Logan Garcia, who is our Digital Communication and Engagement Specialist in our Communications and Engagement Department. He is supporting the virtual portion of this meeting. We also have with us today Director of Development Services, Brett Limbaugh, and he's our staff expert that's here. And then we have Matt Sura, and he's here as special counsel to the City of Loveland on oil and gas regulations. I also want to thank you guys. Thank you for attending. And I want to make sure that before we get into the meat of the meeting, that we've gone over some of what you can expect today. We appreciate those of you who have taken a look at our project website, those of you who have submitted comments beforehand. Our team has seen them beforehand, and we do feel like we're going to address them. But if we haven't, make sure you let us know. I also want to let you know that as you walked into the room, we had some maps, and the maps outline the current locations where oil and gas development may take place in Loveland. And we're going to be going over that again in the presentation. I want to point out too, you've got a comment card in front of you. We're going to collect feedback several different ways today. One of the ways, we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable speaking and having their voice heard, but not everybody wants to be on a podium. We are filming today. Not everybody wants to be on camera. Not everybody wants to be speaking into a microphone. I'm going to encourage you to provide feedback in all of these ways. So you can do it with a piece of paper that we gave you. Please return that at the end of the night for those of you who are in person. Those of you who are virtual, we're going to make sure that we have a public comment period. Each person that wants to participate, whether in person or virtual, will have 3 minutes. So virtually you can do there's also going to be a link that's shared for those who are virtual. And then you've got the piece of paper, sorry. After today, we are going to make sure that you also have 60 days to provide additional feedback. So as we're recording this, we're going to make sure that it's posted tomorrow to our website. And then you're going to have 60 days from tomorrow to make sure that you can. Let's say you have a friend that wasn't able to make it. You'll be able to share that with them, and they'll be able to see the meeting, learn about the proposed changes, and have input as well. The other thing is we don't expect you to leave tonight with all of the answers. And that's why we've done the extended virtual input opportunity for you guys. We're also going to talk to you a little bit about what you can expect this process to look like. And then we'll go into regulations, and you'll hear a bit about what are the current regulations, what are the proposed regulations. The entire process of this public input gathering that we're doing really began last year, and we anticipate it to end early fall. So I also want to let you know what our goals of the meeting are. One thing I've heard tonight as people are walking in the room is my feedback actually important? So I want to address that. Yes, your feedback is important. They have not written or drafted other than what you're going to see tonight. What your comments are going to do, they're going to help inform the process. They're going to help inform changes to what you see tonight. So they're going to look through and read all of that, and they'll make changes according to that. And then you'll have more opportunities as those changes are made to provide additional feedback in future meetings. I also want to lay out some ground rules for today. We want to make sure that we get through the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, that's when we'll do public comment. So if you think of a question while someone is speaking, use that sheet of paper that we gave you to write that question down. We'll take those questions during the public comment portion of the meeting. If you don't agree with something, right now what we want to do is respect everybody's space. So if somebody's speaking, we don't want to interrupt them. Everybody's going to be afforded 3 minutes at the podium. So now we also have some more of our housekeeping items. We're going to ask you guys to come in with an open mind. Public input is a spectrum, and we've got a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum. Some people are here because they are unhappy about something. Some people are here because they're happy or want something. And we want the entire spectrum to be heard. We're encouraging diversity of thought today. Because we're recording this, your comments during the public comment portion will also be recorded. So again, you've got the paper, your comments are being recorded and noted, and then we're going to put it online, and online, you're going to have the ability again to have your voice heard. So that's why during the presentation, we're going to listen and respect everybody and where we're at. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Brett Limbaugh, Director of Development Services.
Good evening, everybody. Brett Limbaugh, Development Services Director. I want to start by talking about why we're here. We are in the midst of taking a look at redoing our oil and gas regulations. Our City Council on September 1 looked at our existing regulations and asked that we put a moratorium on new oil and gas drilling until September the 1st. We don't have any current applications in line, and so we feel that this is plenty of time to get your feedback and your input, and then make amendments to the existing documents that we have, the existing ordinances. So let's talk a little bit about SB 19-181. And those are the existing state requirements, the existing state regulations. They were approved in 2019. And before that, we did not have a lot of authority at the local level to craft regulations that went above and beyond what the state required. So back in 2016, we designed a process that essentially stated that you had to follow the state guidelines, but that if you wanted to go above and beyond those guidelines, we could enter into a development agreement with you, and we would look at the additional items that you would want to provide to us for health, safety, and welfare issues, and then we would execute an agreement to that effect. Right now, and I will cover this in just a moment, there are two paths for approval currently for oil and gas in the city of Loveland. What we will have to do when we craft these new regulations, apart from the town halls that we're having tonight, those regulations have to go through our planning commission at a public hearing, and they also have to go through our city council at 2 public hearings. So this won't be your last time to address these issues. We will have another town hall meeting after this one, so you'll have plenty of time to comment. I wanted to thank you for all attending. This is a good place to start. Below the terms why we are here, these 2 paragraphs come from our strategic plan. And this was done several years back. And these are the areas that we want to address. And we want to have a safe and attractive community. And we also want to have protect our natural beauty, but also our natural resources. So what is our role? Well, the producers have to comply with the state regulations. However, the city doesn't have to have any regulations. We could just default to the state. We have adopted those regulations, and we are here to begin the update process. One thing that our council asked us to do is take a look at the Larimer County regulations, which were recently adopted, and use those as a base and to move ahead from there. And so that's what we're doing. These are the current standards. So there's basically 2 veins here. The public process basically defaults to the state regulations. However, that is exposed to a public hearing process before a planning commission, and that can be appealed to city council. The administrative process would require the applicant to enter into an agreement with us to go above and beyond what the state would require. We've approved one well in that capacity, and I think we did very well in getting some additional concessions from the operator. And that is approved directly by by me, the director, and is essentially my decision is final. And so back in 2015, 2016, when we didn't have the right to regulate, we figured this administrative process would be our only way to get additional requirements and regulations approved. And it has actually worked in this instance. Now let's talk about that current project real quickly. It's the MRG facility that was approved in August of 2023. And that's north of 34 here along North County Road 3. What you'll see is a list of additional items that we got through this agreement that are not currently in state standards. So for example, generally you use diesel motors in this operation. We were allowed, we got electrical motors, which are, don't have as many emissions and they're quieter. All of the product is piped off the site. All the water is piped into the site, so that reduces the truck traffic. We have a very substantial landscape buffer that will be around this facility while it's active. We have enhanced our air quality monitoring, dust mitigation for roadways in particular, and additional water quality protection because we have obviously drainage standards that we have to comply with. We wanted to make sure that anything that would come off site with respect to water was accounted for. So here's our first stab at some new regulations. And what I wanted to do is kind of go over those real quickly with you, see if we're headed in the right direction. We want to get your input on this, and Mr. Sura will come up a little later and talk about 14 different areas we want to get your feedback on. So right now, we feel that it's obviously not appropriate to have these facilities in residential districts. So we want to take that off the table first. Also with respect to the floodplain, not allowing them in the floodplain areas. Where could we allow them? Industrial districts, a district called developing resources, and that's basically an area that's primarily agriculturally used. And in certain instances in planned unit developments, unless that planned unit development prohibited it. So that would be the zone districts where it would be applicable. And we also want to look at additional setback requirements. And so what you'll see on those boards, and I'll cover the maps here fairly shortly, is we created buffer areas around acreages of between 2,000 and 1,000 square feet. So for example, on 2,000 square foot or 2,000 feet distance measurement, what we would want to do is use that for school facilities, state licensed daycares, hospitals, medical clinics, high occupancy buildings, senior living facilities, to name a few. And then for residential, we would want that to be 1,000 feet. And that would be from existing or platted residences and or or public parks, neighborhood parks, not including trails and open space in this instance. Public water supply surface intakes, any of our water supply wells, existing reservoirs and future reservoirs. And when you're looking at a facility within which you can frack, generally 2.5 acres is about the size that is adequate for that type of use. And that's also the minimum standard. If I were to want a well and septic for my home, I would have to have a 2.5 acre parcel in order to do that. So that's where we're starting from. And so let's take a look at the maps. And they're all over there too, if you want to get up and take a closer look at them, you know, either now or after the meeting. So this first one really identifies where the existing activity is occurring. And so if you look over on the right side of this map and you see all those well bores, which are in the turquoise, those are primarily in what's called the Wattenberg oil field. And that's coming mostly from Weld County. And so that squiggly kind of brown line is the boundary of the Wattenberg Plain. And then to the west of that, in kind of the purple outline, is the Loveland Field. And so what this map does is it identifies fields, and those fields are essentially not where the oil is, but it's primarily where the existing facilities are located. So I thought we'd start there just to show you where the existing activities is occurring. Then we did our 2.5 acre analysis. And all of the parcels that are outlined in red are within the city of Loveland. All the parcels that are outlined in black are in the county, unincorporated Adams County. And so these are parcels that are large enough to accommodate a facility. And one note, a lot of our PUD activity, future residential activity, is occurring in the northwest area of town. All of those PUDs out there are residential in nature, primarily residential in nature. And we won't be seeing, although they are larger than 2.5 acres, we don't believe we'll be seeing much activity over there just because it's too far west for active drilling, and it's already been designated for residential uses. So I want you to focus in two areas, primarily in the 402 corridor, which is on the south and east side of town. That area is under production right now, and future activities would probably occur there. The parcels in the kind of the north and east portion of the city, there's already a lot of development activity, and of course the airport is up in that direction as well. Although those acreages are larger than 2.5 acres, we think that most of the activity is going to be along the 402 corridor if it isn't already in existence. And so this map applies those 1,000 and 2,000 foot buffers. And so the blue 2,000 foot buffer is the area that would be applied to the kind of the sensitive areas like the daycare centers and the schools. Residential would have to be outside of that orangish buffer boundary. So you can see when you apply these buffers, and they're not codified right now, the area of activity is further reduced. And so we feel that while there is opportunity in Loveland for oil and gas drilling, it's fairly limited. And I'm going to focus just down in that southeast side of town. And so again, the buffers are applied, and then we took the overlay of the existing activity and put that in there as well. And you can see the areas in particular in white where you might see oil and gas drilling. Well, it's already under exploration right now. So the chances of seeing additional facilities there, it may or may not occur, but as far as we're concerned, it's already being activated in the county. Okay, sorry.
So the question we just heard is there a pointer? And there is, so I'm going to get that for him.
Okay, great, okay. So, so the area I'm talking about is right in here. You know, there's some areas over in here as well, here. Some area here.
So he's pointing right now to some of the blue areas that you see on the screen.
Is that clear, your question? Okay, sorry I didn't cover that earlier. Thank you, though. Okay, now as far as an approval process, what would we propose at this point? Well, we have a thing called a conditional use process, and what that requires is an application and an operations plan. And so we would have a very thorough operations plan. The conditional use application obviously would have a site plan, would have ways in which the issues may be mitigated, and then that would go directly to the Planning Commission. In a conditional use process, the Planning Commission can approve the CUP. However, a conditional use permit can also be appealed to City Council. So there's an opportunity not only for one, but two hearings. And that's where we're starting. And we feel that that's a process that we currently use for a number of other different zone districts. We don't really want to create a single process for a single use. That's usually not good planning practice. And we feel this one is the most appropriate, but we can walk through that a little bit more later on. Now that conditional use permit process would apply to an ordinance. And so when you do an ordinance, which goes through planning commission and city council, they usually talk about process and they don't offer a lot of detail on the individual mitigation. Oftentimes it's better to put those standards within a resolution. And so here's some things that may not be in the ordinance, which is codified, but would get approved through a resolution by city council. And we could talk about all the things that you see here with respect to air quality, water quality, and public safety. Of course, there'll be many, many more. But this gives you an idea of kind of like a two-pronged process. So the ordinance would talk about how it gets approved, and this best management practice document would be in a resolution form, also approved by council. And why you would want to separate those out is that a resolution is easier to amend. So if the state requirements get more stringent and we want to match those, it's easier for us to amend a best management practice document. We can do it quicker than going back through and trying to place that into an ordinance. And so we'll talk about some additional standards, and Matt is going to cover this in more detail than I will. But we can talk about pipelines and having the product piped offsite as opposed to trucked. We can, the same thing with the water. We can talk about access roads, how they may be used and how they need to be repaired. We can talk about financial assurances, insurance requirements, buffers for when the well is going through its various stages of pre-production, early production, and actual production. And then we would also want to take a look at plugged and abandoned wells. There are a number of wells out there that were plugged many, many years ago. The technology is a lot better now. And we're in the process right now of having an applicant that wants to do residential development, replug those wells and then place setbacks around them so that they're a little bit safer. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Matt Sir, and he's going to, like I said, talk through about 14 different focus areas. And so he'll talk to you about what the Colorado rule is, what we're proposing, and then why. So Matt.
Hello, my name is Matt Sura. Looking forward to talking to you about these 14 focus areas. These are 14 focus areas that we chose that we thought would be of interest to this audience. This is not the sole limitation of what is going to be addressed either in the code or in the best management practices document that you just heard about. These are areas that we thought you would want to hear about and that are generally of more public interest. There are other issues that are just as important that we're not going to be discussing. We're not going to go into any great depth as an example around insurance requirements. Very important, just not something we're covering tonight. Unless we hear from you that this is something that is really important to you, and though we're going to be taking that comment and really structuring our next public series on the issues that you've identified as most important. So it's really important to hear those comments. If we've missed something or there's an issue that you would really like to hear a lot more about that we covered and you want to go into more depth, those are the types of comments that would be really, really helpful for us. So the first is setbacks. Somehow that got reversed. Setbacks is an important issue. One of the best ways to protect public health, safety, and welfare is to establish a distance between the oil and gas facility, the surface location, and the closest residence. And through studies through CDPHE, they found that generally you start not seeing very many impacts, whether that's noise or particularly in air quality, when you get at least 2,000 feet away. So looking at setbacks, I want to make sure that we have a really strong setback of 2,000 feet for our most vulnerable residents, schools, childcare facilities, elderly care homes, those types of things, high density buildings, hospitals. But also a firm 1,000-foot setback for residences. And that's doubling what is at ECMC. That is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. They have a firm 500-foot setback from homes. And that setback can be waived by the surface owner. The surface owner can decide that, you know, if it's their surface that is being impacted and they would rather have the oil and gas facility near their home rather than out in the middle of their field, we want to allow for that to happen. It's, you know, it's certainly their choice if they want to have an oil and gas facility closer to their home than 1,000 feet. But we're giving them that choice. And again, that's twice as stringent as the ECMC. Now, reverse setbacks is kind of the flip side of the coin. We have existing oil and gas facilities out there. How close can a new home be to an existing oil and gas facility? Well, the analysis that we've done and is kind of general practice is that the most impacted time of an oil and gas development is during the drilling and hydraulic fracturing and first production. If you're coming into an area where that has already been accomplished, you're not going to have the kind of impacts that you would otherwise. And so we're allowing for less setback and looking at 200 to 500 foot setback, a reverse setback during production. Well, first of all, 1,000-foot setback during pre-production and that early production, and then 200 to 500 feet setback during production. And then when that well has stopped production and is now a plugged and abandoned well, at least a 200-foot setback from new homes, unless they can prove that that well has been properly plugged and abandoned through some studies. Air quality mitigation is a real concern, and we've got the Air Quality Control Commission that has a host of regulations on the oil and gas industry. One of which that is important is the idea of pre-production monitoring, air quality monitoring. Their current requirement is that they come in and they have a baseline study to determine what is the baseline air quality before there's any oil and gas development, and then they do that air quality monitoring all during pre-production, which is hydraulic drilling and then hydraulic fracturing, and then for 6 months thereafter. Now, the city is considering extending that to 3 years. And the reason for that is because for the most part, these wells, they come in big, they produce about 75% of what they're going to produce over their lifetime in the first 2 years. That flush of oil and gas is where you're going to have the most potential for emissions, and wanting to make sure that we're capturing that, and if there is any emissions that are occurring, making sure that we know about it as soon as possible. Other ways that this would go beyond the state requirements is that requiring all the engines that Brett just mentioned on the production side to be electrified, not being run by diesel engines. Also requiring electric line power to power electric drilling rigs. Drilling rigs are generally utilize diesel fuel. They can be noisier. They certainly have more emissions. Electric is going to reduce both of those. Alternative location analysis. These wells are, it's extraordinary technology. They're going down at least a mile. They're turning that drill bit and they're going out potentially 3 miles. They're looking at even potentially 4-mile laterals. That gives them the flexibility to locate these in places where they're going to be least objectionable, where maybe the surface owner wants them and the area is not surrounded by a residential area. And so making sure that these locations are selected properly is an important part of an alternative location analysis. The ECMC rule requires it only in certain instances. The city is looking at requiring it for every location. Noise mitigation. Again, ECMC has noise requirements and doesn't allow for industrial level noise in a residential area. we would look to have a residential standard applied throughout the area. Any residential area that's nearby would not have anything close to industrial level noise. And we would require the operator to put in place a complaint process that if they get a complaint, that they're on that complaint and they're responding to that complaint within 24 hours. Baseline water monitoring, again, ECMC has been doing this for more than 10 years, requiring 4 nearby water wells to inspect the quality of that water as a baseline, to come back 5 months after the first drilling and fracking is completed, and then 5 years thereafter. Right now, we're looking at a proposed city concept that's going to require the operator to offer to any resident within a half a mile to have their water well tested, both baseline and then every 2 years thereafter during the production. Electric requirement, as I already mentioned, this is a city. We have access, better access than they do in the county to electrical lines. And so believe that it is feasible for all wells to utilize electric drilling rigs and of course, bringing that electricity to the production facilities as well. Traffic management is something that ECMC leaves to local governments. It is truly local government jurisdiction and always has been. Well, we're making sure that the transportation planning is done ahead of time and the operator is paying for any needed transportation improvements. If can be a lot of traffic in certain parts of the development of an oil and gas facility, and having a lot of big trucks, big rigs lined up on a county road, you know, sometimes can be a dangerous situation and certainly inconvenient for the rest of us that are living in the area. It may need a turnout. It may need an extra lane. Those are the types of additional considerations that will go into that traffic management planning. Fencing, it's a couple issues for fencing. One, it is an aesthetic issue, but 2, it's a city, and we want to make sure that we're keeping young children out, anybody that, you know, wants to do harm to that oil and gas facility. These need to be secured facilities. Visual mitigation and landscaping. Again, this is a municipality. There is going to be residential development occurring in the area. Certainly there's greater density of people living in city than in the county. We want to make sure that it's not an objectionable looking facility, that is considered. Local government inspections. State law does allow for local governments to charge operators for inspections of that facility, and currently we're contemplating having that provision to allow for inspections to be paid for by the operator that is being inspected rather than the taxpayer. Liquid pipelines, one of the biggest impacts once that oil and gas development has occurred, the drilling and the hydraulic fracturing has gone away, then you're left with an operating facility. And one of the biggest impacts of an operating facility is if they have a tank battery there. That's a huge potential impact for volatile organic compounds and other air quality pollutants like benzene. And there's going to be truck traffic hauling that oil away, unless you put all of that oil in a pipeline. It's the best way to minimize the impacts to a production facility, is to make sure that the takeaway is through a pipeline rather than through storage in tanks and trucking. Dust mitigation. Again, this is a nuisance issue. And when you're operating in a city, as you know, this would be, you have to be able to be mindful of the fact that you have neighbors nearby. And so noise, odor, dust, there needs to be good, strong regulations, plans in place for those, and a mechanism for them to respond quickly to complaints if they should occur. Financial assurance. The ECMC just within the last 2 years went through a large rulemaking on financial assurance. The kind of base standard rate for small operators is $100,000 per location and $20,000 to $40,000 per well. And that can vary greatly if they're higher producing operators. They get a deep discount on that. And the proposed city concept is to make sure that we at least have that minimum $30,000 per well and $100,000 per location. Brett?
Okay, and like I stated before, council wanted us to start with Larimer County as kind of a baseline standard. So we have a comparison chart here that talks about what the state requirements are, what Larimer County's requirements are, what is deemed to be strict or stricter or most strict. And you'll see on the left-hand side a number of different factors that we compared across those lines. And so obviously the Larimer County is stricter than the state requirements. But in many cases, what we're proposing here is more strict. And there's good reasoning for that. We keep deferring back to electrical. But if you're out in the county, you may not have the capacity to run electric motors. We have a water and power department here in the city, certainly can provide enough electrical voltage to run these facilities. We also would do what we would think is a better job on mitigation for dust, air quality, and some other items. So our charge was to, at the very least, match the Larimer County requirements, and I think we're going a little bit further. So let's talk about timeline. We went to City Council in a study session back in February and talked to them about this moratorium. Talked to them about how we were going to proceed through the public process. And so you see the red dot that says we are here. So we're at the very beginning. This is the first town hall meeting. And we want to get your feedback tonight. And if at all possible, we'd like to have you focus on some of the categories that Matt discussed. There are certainly people that are pro-fracking and anti-fracking. One thing that we can't do is not allow it. So what we can do is put together some rules and regulations that go above and beyond what the state would require, and that's kind of what we're here to do. So with the input that we get from you tonight, and I hope you can be very specific in your comments because that will be very, very helpful. We will go back and we will draft the initial ordinance, and we will draft the initial best management practices document. And then we'll get those out well ahead of time and have another town hall just like this one. And we'll want to get your feedback on the drafts. And then we'll have time to make corrections for those before we go through the public hearing process. And as I mentioned earlier, our planning commission is the first to hear that. And what they do is they make a recommendation to council because this is an ordinance. And then the council has an open public hearing also on first reading. And if there are unresolved issues on the second reading, then there's another opportunity to have that discussion. So I wanted to let you know that there is plenty of time for you to give us public input here. We really appreciate you coming out tonight to help us with this. But we are on a fairly tight time schedule. So we want to give you adequate time to review the documents. We have a website that's up so you can monitor our progress. Get all the documentation you need, including this PowerPoint presentation. We're always available if you have want to make a phone call, you want to send us an email, that's fine. You want to come in and talk to us, that's fine too. Go ahead and do that. And any input you can give to us would be most helpful. So I'm going to turn it back once again to our moderator, and we will get to questions.
Thanks, Brett. So we're going to allow in-person to speak first, and it's going to be 3 minutes per person. There's going to be a timer that should appear on the screen, and that should help us be able to keep track of those times. So we already see that some folks are lining up at the microphone. We've got 3 up there currently. Once we go through the in-person, we're going to allow an opportunity for the virtual to join us, and those folks will have an opportunity to hear about how to participate in that portion. A few reminders before we start. The purpose of the meeting is to evaluate oil and gas regulations. And so we want to make sure that we're staying on topic with that is, what we want to hear your comments on. We want to hear what your thoughts are on that. A reminder that you have paper because not everybody wants to be on camera or have their voices recorded. You can do that and you can speak in public comment, or you can do that. We will also have not just this recording, but as Brett said, the presentation. And you'll have an opportunity tomorrow to go to an online link and provide more feedback because as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you're going to have thoughts that are going to come to mind 10 days from now. That's going to be open for 60 days for you to go. And if somebody has not been able to attend this meeting and you want to encourage them to watch the video, I would definitely say, please watch the presentation so that you can hear and see specifically some of the proposed regulation changes and then comment specifically to that. That would be super helpful. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker.
Good evening. My name is Leo Grassens. I'm a resident of the City of Loveland. And first of all, thank you for your presentations and for going through this. A lot of work goes into this. I have a brother who's a city planner in the Netherlands, and he and I always talk about it. His specialty is sound level. So let's make a remark about sound level. In your plan, you defined the limit to be 65 dB. I would say that is a little contentious. It's quite high. The World Health Organization recommends 45 dB. So for those that don't understand dBs, that's a factor 4 softer than 65 dB. But what I would like to say is it also, it depends on how you measure this, right? So what I would suggest is you consider language that defines how the sound is measured. And I would say that the level is measured at a residence or hospital or house or school shall not exceed a certain dB level. So rather than saying 65 dB, just define a little more precisely how it's measured and lower the number if you can. And I would strongly suggest the 45 dB limit. Happy to help if you need any help with that. Thank you.
Good evening. I appreciate you all being here. My name is Dr. Jim Danforth. Practiced medicine here for 35 years and have lived in Loveland about 47. Been retired about 12 years. And Matt, I've been in a lot of meetings when you were there, and I really appreciate you being on this commission because I think you're knowledgeable and fair. So I appreciate that. Just one concern about the 1,000-foot setbacks to residential. I'm familiar with the CDPHE studies from 2017 and 2019, which we could have a discussion about, but they talked about 2,000 feet. And when you've got children and pregnant women living in houses that might be 1,000 feet away, they are at risk. So I'm not sure where the 1,000 came from. My major concern is I'm a doctor, and you're stuck with the fact that I'm concerned about health issues. And I know, I think you guys have done a great job of looking at a lot of these issues, and I appreciate the individual who is putting in the wells and that they've accepted some really good protocols that you folks have helped lay out. So I'm good with that. But we've still got an issue, even though we've got great regulations, we have bad air in the summertime here. We've got high ozone levels, high particulate levels, and those are the concerns that I have. So I wonder, are we gonna allow fracking and flow back during the summer months when our ozone level's already high and we've got the ultraviolet that's gonna help generate more ozone? Or are we gonna limit it at least in the winter and do the fracking and flow back in the winter time if possible? Let's see. And these wells are going to get refracked, I presume, at least once during their lifetime, and probably more than that. And we have this 3-month deal where we're going to monitor air quality during those 3 months. What do we do when the well's refracked? And if a well's going to be refracked, are you going to let somebody build a home closer than 1,000 feet to a well that's already there but might be refract? Just something to think about. You know, our issue, at least according to Larimer County, that's creating our air problem is not within our community. It's east of us. It's in Weld County where there's 50,000 wells. And I know Councilman Foley was correct in that most of the time the air blows from the west to east, but during the warm summer days, air heats up, rises. This is according to atmospheric scientists. And we suck in air from the east in those situations that gives us the real problem with our ozone. And then we've got I-25 running on our eastern border. So those are where things come from for us. And so we just need to be aware of that. And all of this, unfortunately, contributes to, oh crap, okay,
No.
sorry.
It's okay. That's not an oh
I'd be
crap
happy to
moment.
talk to anyone who wants to talk to me about the concerns that I have as a physician, but hard to do in 3 minutes. Took me 7 years to become a doctor, so it's tough to put all that in 3 minutes.
But you know what? That is also why we have that online form and the piece of paper in front of you, and we definitely want to hear it. And I also want to remind folks that we are taking notes. We're also recording this so we can go back to it. So if, we can't take notes quickly enough, we can pull transcripts. It's all good. So just want to assure you that we are listening, even though it looks like we're writing or on our computers. There's a lot being done up here. I also want to ask, can you please not only state your name, but can you let us know if you're a resident of Loveland or what your interest is in this topic? That would be appreciated. And then just the reminder that we've got the 3-minute clock on the screen. So thank you so much.
Hi, my name's John Whalen. I'm a resident of Loveland, and I was in the oil industry and the directional drilling industry for 11 years, and then I've been in the water treatment industry for 30 years. So I have a special interest in water use in the oil field. But the comments I have for this is on pipelines. When you're regulating if they have an oil pipeline, make sure they have a gas pipeline. Make sure both are functional be operational before production begins. That's how they got away with all the flaring in North Dakota. It's like, oh, we can't have, we don't have a gas pipeline. What do? Make them put the gas line in when they put in the oil line. Can also put in water lines at the same time when they're running pipe. Number 2, water use issues. Somebody's going to bring between 5 million and 10 million gallons of water onto this drilling site and pump it into the ground with some chemicals added. And when it comes back up out of the ground, maybe a little more water than you put down, something has to be done with it. You do 2 things with it. You either recycle it and put it back into fracking operations, leaving 5 to 10 million gallons of fresh water in the creeks and in your aquifers, or you take that 5 to 10 million gallons of used once frack water and you pump it into the ground to be lost forever in these deep injection wells. That's where the earthquakes come from. When people talk about fracking and earthquakes, it's the huge amounts of water. In 2018, 15 trillion gallons of fresh water were used in Colorado for fracking operations. So I get a little emotional about it. But anyway, if the city can, just because protecting wildlife, protecting the environment, put a limit, 60% of the water used in fracking operations because they're pumping their frack water underneath the city of Loveland, make them use 60%, 80% of recycled oil field wastewater instead of aquifer or creek and river water. Okay, we're losing fresh water, trillions of gallons to fracking, because once it's used in fracking, it can never be used again for anything except fracking. Noble and the 2 biggest operators actually ran systems, which I worked in, to recycle the water to put back into fracking. But it's too expensive. It costs $4.35 for a barrel of oil to reprocess it and 72 cents to pump it down a well and lose it forever. Oh, and impact fees. Always charge big impact fees for every well drilled because that gives you money for staff and buying land. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Efi Buckner-Oppler. I've lived in this area 49 years, surrounded by the city of Loveland in the meantime, but I do own property in Loveland, so I really care about our town. What concerns me is the one question. I think mineral owners should have the right to be able to profit from the mineral rights. But how do other American states get by with outlawing fracking in their states? Just food for thought. I don't know what we can do because I think it's too dangerous for our citizens, for our health, to allow fracking within city limits. That's the first thing. And the other thing is also what this gentleman just mentioned about the wastewater. Really never had earthquakes. We never had earthquakes down on the border between Colorado and New Mexico. You need to have a geological survey to be allowed to drill for oil. You do not have to have a geological survey, from what I know, to push the water back in the ground, the wastewater, in order to get rid of it. That's causing the earthquakes, from what I hear. So I think that's something that you guys need to consider. Also, what kind of upsets me as a person is, being European, I appreciate that a lot of the oil and gas that we deliver here, ruining our environment in our country. So our neighbors, our friends in other nations can have the resources, and the oil companies get even richer than they are. And that is something that really upsets me, that we are allowing to ruin our environment so other countries have the oil that they rightfully need also. But what I mentioned to Brett before, they waited until they have built all the pipelines so they can transport the oil down to the refineries in Houston, from what I hear. And so why do we allow to have our environment ruined, to have the oil and gas that we are not going to benefit from, then transported to other countries? Okay, and I think that's pretty much, oh, we are semi-arid climate here. We don't have unlimited water. We are already pumping it over from the other side. And then we need so much water. I prefer to take a shower. I can put on a sweater not to heat my house too warm. But I think we have to be more conservative in our use of energy so we can afford to make better choices. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Matthews, and I'm a resident of Loveland. I just want to say I agree with every single thing everybody has said. And I don't have any facts and figures, and I'm not a scientist, but I am a nurse. And I really am concerned about the health of our wonderful little citizenship here. And I know that there's been so much controversy about to frack or not to frack. Are there earthquakes or are there not? But it's true. You're going to use up way too much water that will never be used again. And we are a semi-arid. We are having drought. Maybe not right this minute, but we are. And I am totally against this idea of using so much water unless you guys can figure out another way to get the oil out of the ground. Don't do this to our water. The other thing is, I was just reading today that the United States is the #1 supplier of oil and gas in the world right now. And with that knowledge, I just don't understand why this has to be done in the middle of a residence where there's so many people that can be affected. And obviously you're going through a lot of work to make sure that we're not, the mitigation, the sound, the dust, the blah, 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 all this stuff. Wouldn't it make more sense to go to Montana? Or somewhere where, I mean, not that I think that that natural resource should be raped and pillaged. I don't think so. And we're not definitely on the alternative methods yet, really in good shape yet, but we will. And I'm not going to be stupid enough to say no more gas, no more oil, but there's got to be another way. Get out of our neighborhoods. Stop using our water. And I think you'll have a better reception. Thank you.
Are there any more? Okay, it looks like we have one more in-person, two more in-person comments, and then we'll move over to the virtual participation. Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you. My name's Rob Malloy. I'm a Ward 1 resident, and I'm a land planner. So I've got some concerns on that level, but there's also some things that I think you may have touched on, but I'm not sure. One, on health and safety on that side of it, one concern is about injection wells. I don't think regulations have been placed on, or if injection wells are allowed within city limits, or even Larimer County for that point. To me, those are more dangerous than the wells themselves. As we've seen, there's a number of them out in Greeley, and I'm quite familiar with them. So that's a big concern of mine, of whether those are even allowed within the city. So I'd like you to take a look at that. And then, of course, floodway and floodplain locations of these wells. I'm not sure if you touched on that. You know, in 2013, we had that major flood, and it took out a few wells on its way out to Nebraska. If you can take a look at that. The fire training, I know we have a couple fire people here. Obviously, that's going to take extra training for these wells. Just want to make sure that that's been covered. I don't remember if that's ever been talked about. Of course, there's costs associated with that type of training for fire at these wells. And then my biggest thing, the reason I'm really here, is the placement of the wells on the property. You talk about setbacks, and I know they've increased them. I was on the Planning Commission in 2013 when we went through these regulations. We did some enhanced, and obviously they've become more enhanced enhanced regulations back in 13. So that's a good thing. The setbacks have increased quite a bit. But we don't talk about setbacks of the wells on property lines, from property lines and such. So when these wells are put in and you got 1,000-foot setback, the person's neighboring property loses value in development. They won't be able to subdivide the property out, build houses and such. We talk about, the houses have to be new houses have to be at least 1,000 feet from these wells. I've come across projects where I've had the wells put up against property lines, and we were unable to, the owner was unable to develop the property because of the setback issues. So I don't think that's ever been talked about, the other side of the story of what setbacks do to the value of somebody's property if they ever want to sell or subdivide in the future. So that's why.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more in person, and then we can move over to the virtual attendees.
Hi, Cindy Van Slambrook, Ward 2. And I just wanted to say I agree with everything that everybody said. All of it's good. You have some great people here giving great advice. My particular thing, in addition to everything they said, the 2,000 foot setback, I think you should really consider. Also, to bring the public along and just keep all of us calmer, I suggest that you have oil companies provide a 24-hour public-facing air monitoring for during the fracking, during the drilling, and if a facility is there. We're all concerned about air quality. Everything that everybody has said is really true. This, it's a huge concern. It's affecting all of us, and it's affecting all of us monetarily. In terms of water, the gentleman who spoke about conserving that water, reusing it, recycling it, that is something that hasn't been done successfully by everybody. Most people don't even try because of the cost. But think about the long-term, even the short-term implications of using our water in this way and not being able to go back and use it again because it has those fracking chemicals in it. Companies have done it, and oil companies are making record profits. I have people in my family who are in the oil industry right now, Greeley and other places. And I'm glad they get paid well. All of that is good, but we still need oil and gas. But please have some long-term planning about what we're going to do with this water, and consider having the oil companies, pay for this. Also the monitoring. So thank you very much. I have a few requests. Can you provide links to the data from tonight's PowerPoint presentation and also from the February 13th PowerPoint presentation. And that's where my relatives that are in the oil industry they just want to look at it more. One more thing, I want to echo what Mayor Marsh asked for at February 13th when she said, could you please compare these standards to Broomfield and Arapahoe County? And of course, our standards in the city with our population density needs to be, in every case, more strong than it is in Larimer County. We're full of people here, very close to each other. Thank you for all your good work, and thank you for all the comments and everyone who showed up.
Thank you. After tonight, lovegov.org/oil and gas is where we'll be posting information. This video will be there for those family members or friends or people who weren't able to attend to watch the presentation. Yeah. Could you go to the microphone for a quick second? Sorry. It's on the paper that you were given this morning, this afternoon when you walked in, sorry. At the very bottom of it.
So the data you actually worked from, not just the PowerPoint, but especially the February 13th, all that data wasn't in there. And again, most people aren't going to want that, but I have people in my family work for Noble and Arco, and it was around, and Southwestern Energy, and so and Chevron. So yeah, it's the data, link to the data.
Thank you. That was presented at the last council meeting. Thank you for clarifying that, the February meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
And tonight, the data you're drawing from, because this is a great PowerPoint presentation, but the data you're drawing from. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to turn it over to the virtual portion of the meeting. There might be a slight delay because users that are on Zoom, there may sometimes be that slight delay, but we're going to turn it over to Logan. Logan's going to explain the process for the virtual attendees so that they can participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Attendees who wish to comment, please use the raise your hand feature under the reactions tab in the Zoom app. If you're calling in, you can use *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. When it's your turn to speak, you'll receive a notification that the host has asked you to unmute. And at that time, please unmute yourself, provide your name and city of residence, and begin your question or comment. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll be sharing a time clock on my screen in just a moment. For those attending by phone, I'll give you a warning when your time has expired. All right, so let's get started with our first attendee. Karen A. You should receive a notification shortly to begin your public comment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Karen Artel. I actually live in Fort Collins. I'm particularly concerned about air quality, but I have some other topics to touch on also. One is the previous commenter brought up Arapahoe County's new oil and gas regulations. And I did send earlier this evening the comment box on your website is a little limited as far as characters. So, but I did kind of copy just kind of a summary of what those regulations are. One of them is from November 14th, 2023, is that they require oil and gas operations to be 3,000 feet away from existing and planned reservoirs when down gradient conditions can be demonstrated, and increased setbacks from occupied structures, platted lots, outside activity areas, and water bodies from 2,000 feet to now 3,000 feet. Include a wildland urban interface protections determined necessary by the fire district. Now, that's particularly important, I think, with the issues with fires like they had in Boulder throughout really Larimer County and our urban areas. And And then they also require soil contamination testings for any incidents where fluids move off a well pad, and require creation of groundwater and surface water quality plans. I also, one person mentioned the ozone season. I think it would be a good idea to not allow pre-production activity during the ozone season. Another person talked about the amount of water that fracking uses. And, you know, I just want to give a kind of a comparison of the amount of water that was used along the Front Range. Let's see, 255 million barrels of water, or that's more than 10 billion gallons of water, and 99% of that water was fresh water. And you compare that to this project, a plan for 2 reservoirs. They will supply enough water to provide 13 billion gallons of water annually, enough water for 80,000 families annually. So you can see the amount of water that fracking uses is a really big deal, and that somehow needs to be addressed.
Thank you so much, Karen. We'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Dahlia Z. You should receive a notification shortly to speak.
Hi there. I'm not sure if my camera's on, but can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, and it's just audio.
Right,
So
great. All right, thank you. So my name is Dahlia, I do live in Loveland, and I have some questions. First of all, I want to commend the whole group for doing this. I think they put a lot of work into these regulatory constraints, and that's like the only way that we can take some control over this process, and I laud you. And I just have some questions, like why are PUDs excluded from the setbacks? So, I mean, they could be living units, so I'm not really sure why they are, so maybe you guys could answer that later. I like the resolution for the health and welfare standards. And I think they need to be quantified in some way if we can, to make sure that things are like meeting certain levels. Water is extremely important to me, and many people already mentioned it before. You know, it's a huge deal. We are low on water. It's going to be our most precious resource coming up soon. And I really think that these operators need to be a little careful about how much they use, how they recycle it, and maybe, I mean, I don't even know if they have to pay for the water, but they should be charged extra for going over a certain amount. That is my biggest concern. What do we do with that water that comes out? Some of it brings up some barium and radium from the already existing ground. I also have a couple of questions about the setbacks. So there's seismic activity frequently associated with these wells. How do they know that it's not going to affect their underground infrastructure, their sewer lines and water lines, etc.? So, you know, having seen some earthquake damage, it makes me a little worried that some of this drilling and really hard, I used to live near, not too far from a quarry, and like really, it does make an impact on your walls and etc. I have questions about what are acceptable uses for the land once these wells are capped, or what do you call them, plugged or abandoned? Is that like a brownfield? So that land is no longer ever to be used for housing, or I don't know, like, is it considered a contaminated land? That is a question I have. I really don't know about that. And yeah, so I'm really very happy about the group that's working on these regulations. I think we do need to be stricter than the state, stricter than the county. We are a city. And I would like to read at the end something that I found on the master plan for Loveland. It says, in our community, people are surrounded by sustainable natural beauty, and we protect our natural resources as a legacy for future generations. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to our next speaker. Karen A., you should receive a notification to speak shortly.
Hey, Logan, she may have already spoken.
Thanks so much, Cam.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, sorry, I neglected to lower my hand, so sorry about that. I've already spoken.
Oh, I apologize. We'll go ahead and move on to the next person. Jill O., you should receive a notification shortly.
Hello, and thank you for everybody's comments. They're very constructive. My question is about the air monitoring that is going to be done. My question is, how is that air monitoring going to be done? I took a tour with a real estate investment company and was shown a drilling area, an area where there was drilling in a residential community, and was told that emissions could be monitored by a human being. I would hope that you would look carefully at that issue and require electronic monitoring that provides continuous monitoring and alerting of any of these substances that are known to be harmful to humans and being targeted in this setback determination. I'd also like to know what those harmful substances are and have that communicated to people who live near there. I also wonder what happens with these and the air monitoring. What happens during the extreme wind events that we often experience? How does that affect the emissions, and how do we know about it? And what happens when you are alerted about emissions? What's the action plan? What's the action plan for residents? I am a resident of Loveland, and I happen to care very much about the air I breathe and the air that my children breathe, and that the air that my grandchildren breathe. And I would like to see our city protect all our residents and their respiratory systems in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next person. Jana O., you should receive a notification shortly.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for allowing this public dissertation, I guess, on things. I would like to know, I would like to suggest that whoever is drilling, that they provide their own fire remediation, and that they also, provide training to local fire departments, our local fire department, for anything that would happen. I know that in Texas, that's something that they do. They provide their own fire department on site. Number two is, according to Google, 1 mile is, where is it? 5,280 feet. And so when you're talking about 2,000 feet being the maximum, that's only 0.37 of a mile. It's about a third of a mile. That's not very far from a resident. And especially when you're talking about whether it's agricultural or whether it's residential, that is very, very close, that they're being allowed not only for other people to build and potentially live in, but for any sort of livestock. Also, the water issue, which seems other people more knowledgeable than I, but I think it's a huge issue. Also, 65 decibels is pretty loud. And I would suggest that at some point, the commission maybe have somebody come in and put out so that you can hear what 65 decibels is. And that could be day and night. That's very loud. And the gentleman that suggested going with the World Health Organization, 45 decibels, seems much more reasonable. Also, the use of the land after their use of it, I'd like to see, and maybe there would be other people in other parts of the country, studies that maybe others have had 5, 10, 15, maybe 50 years out. You're talking about the future. And when you're talking about a future with less water, more pollution, and we don't even know what's going to happen to this, what is the half-life or whatever of what they leave? Is that going to just disintegrate and then pollute for further generations? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we have one more person with their hand up. So just another reminder for those who are attending virtually, if you would wish to comment, please use the raise your hand feature now, and we can get you in the queue. All right, next it looks like we have Laura B. You'll receive a notification shortly.
Hi there. Yes, I am a resident. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Great, thanks. I'm a resident of Loveland, and one of the things I haven't heard mentioned yet, maybe I missed it, was the chemicals that are used in the process. How are we going to be monitoring the use of those? Will the companies be telling us what chemicals and compounds are used? Because when there were issues with fracking in Pennsylvania and people were sick, the companies would not release that information. So I think we should regulate it from the beginning that it is a requirement, and find ways to monitor that so that those chemicals don't leak into the water table or the aquifers. Like, how's that going to be monitored? How's that going to be regulated? I know some of the other water things were spoken of already, but those specifically are questions that I'd like to see. And where some of the decisions that were made, like within the 2,000 feet setback, where did we come up with that decision? Because like some other places do a lot more than that. California does 3,200. So the data behind why that decision was made, I think would be very helpful for the residents to be able to understand why that was the decision on the setback. And then how are we mitigating against the drilling underneath people's homes? Like if there are issues with that, how are those be handled as well? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will move on to our next speaker. Jesse G. You should receive a notification shortly.
Good evening. I'd first like to express appreciation for going above and beyond the state mandated regulations. However, I am a resident of Loveland, and I serve as the conservation chair for the Fort Collins Audubon Society, though I'm not speaking on their behalf. But as a wildlife habitat ecologist, I just want to express some concern that the maps that were used to do the site placement analyses seem really simplistic in that they are only taking into account human assets. And we can be pretty confident that these locations are not vacuums. They're going to be used by local wildlife, and we know that wildlife are affected by things like by noise pollution, by light pollution, by human activities, by fragmentation through the development of roads to and from the fracking locations, and just from the destruction of the habitat by the wells themselves. And so what I would like to see is more in-depth analysis that takes into account the location of wildlife nesting sites, their key resources, the corridors between those resources, migration routes, things of that sort. And so far, I haven't seen that discussed in any way. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will move on to our next speaker. Pam L., you will receive notification shortly.
Hello. Hi,
can
thank
hear
you. Thank you very much for, and am I unmuted? Are we fine?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's comments, and I'll attempt not to backtrack over any of them. I am a resident of Loveland and a family practice physician as well. And but I'd like to question what the limitations or the restrictions are on how close the horizontal wells or drills, I don't know what you call those, the horizontal lines can get to reservoirs. Because it would seem that they would have to be kept pretty far away from these natural water sources in case there were an explosion or a leak. Because if that were to happen, we'd be talking about multi-million dollars consequences. And I don't know exactly what the City of Loveland can do to hold the developers responsible should that happen. And also, I'm familiar with the fact that many of these wells do go abandoned after a while, and that a lot of the developers file bankruptcy so that they don't have to deal with the consequences of the cleanup. So I don't know what we can do as a city about that. However, I would like to have that taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Looks like we've got one more person with their hand raised. So just another reminder to raise your hand now if you'd like to speak. Otherwise, we will turn it over to Pam L. Before we send it back into the room.
Logan,
I just spoke.
Pam L. had just spoken.
Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. Looks like we had Penny K.
It's actually not Penny, it's John Kindred. And my question is, in the presentation that was made in the beginning of the program, there were many references to assorted requirements in monitoring setbacks, noise levels. The question is, you can have those, but there was never any mention of any sort of sanction or consequence if those requirements were violated. Is it going to be on a, for example, if there's over acceptable emissions, would it be by the day? Would it be by the event? Would it be by would the city have the authority to actually shut down the project until the problem was corrected? Is it a fine? How does that work on all of those issues where there's a requirement? And what would be the consequence to the oil gas producer? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it looks like that might be everyone who has their hand raised. So at that point, I'll turn it back to you in the room, Kim.
Thanks, Logan. Just like we allowed the virtual participants to, one more chance. If there's anybody else, please raise your hand. Is there anybody else in the room publicly that has a thought if you haven't spoken already? Okay, if you can come up, and then it looks like we have some time. So the gentleman who raised his hand, it looks like we have some time.
So with the setbacks, a majority, 69.4% of Loveland residents are dependent elderly and children. And so the setback should be a minimum of 2,000, maybe a minimum of 3,000. But I'm looking at Loveland and I'm seeing, gosh, those pipes are going to fit all the way over to Mariana Buttes. So how can we limit how far they go under our city? And yes, how can we limit getting to those reservoirs? And how are we going to protect our community that is at risk?
Could you tell us your name and
Oh yeah, I'm Catherine Douglas Gocher. I own 3 properties in Loveland, 2 that are very close to what is currently being fracked.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm John Whalen again. A thought on the reverse setbacks. Somebody mentioned some of those wells will be refracked. I don't know about refracking, but all wells require workovers. And there's a lot of spray, and there are times when pressure will spew things out. So I'd really think about how close you let residents go by, because again, though there will be work on those wells, no matter what, and sometimes it's get messy. So letting people encroach on it could create some problems.
Okay, with that, we're going to do another check of the virtual attendees. I'm going to throw it back to Logan to check one more time on virtual attendees.
All right, it looks like we have Jana C. You'll receive a notification to talk shortly.
Yes, I did speak with before, but I'm wondering, as the conversation has continued, would it be possible to require whoever is going to do the drilling, fracking, to set aside in cash a several $million fund for mitigation in the future that maybe they don't know about, that maybe they cannot, maybe nobody can decide what that might be. But I really believe that all these things that we're doing to Mother Earth will have consequences in the future, and that I will be long gone, but there will be lots of children to follow me, my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So in terms of just protection of the environment, and certainly the natural environment also, birds, bees, elk, trees, everything, that they would be required to set aside a fund, not that they would promise it because they could just, declare bankruptcy, but that would have to be put in a fund for use only for mitigation in the future. It's just a thought. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And it looks like that might be everyone. Just one last call for anyone attending virtually. If they'd like to speak, please use that raise your hand feature and we'll get you queued up here. All right, Kim, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Logan. And thank you, Logan. And thank you to everybody who is participating virtually and in person. You guys, we really do appreciate your input. We appreciate your time today. We appreciate your time in the future. We're going to continue this process. As a reminder, this is a process that doesn't end here. Now they take back the public input that we're collecting from now until the next 60 days. Remember, that will be online at lovegov.org/oil and gas. We'll also be tomorrow posting a copy of this video, and then there's a link online for you to be able to submit additional feedback. Please continue to participate, stay involved in your local government. Thank you so much for attending tonight.